Let me ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it for a moment before we go any further. When was the last time you felt genuinely proud of yourself? Not because something went your way, not because someone gave you a compliment, but because you looked at how you showed up in your day and thought, I did that right. I made the harder choice. I was the person I said I wanted to be. For a lot of people, that feeling is rarer than it should be. Not because they lack talent, not because life has been unusually cruel to them, but because there's a quiet gap between who they are and who they know they could be. A gap filled with habits they haven't built, decisions they keep postponing, patterns they recognize but haven't broken. If you felt something when I said that, this conversation is for you. Because what follows is not about inspiration. Inspiration fades by Tuesday. This is about the actual mechanisms of change, the specific shifts in thinking and behavior that separate people who keep growing from people who stay stuck. We're going to move through 10 principles, and if you engage with them honestly rather than just listening passively, something in how you see yourself in your daily life will shift. So let's start where everything starts. There is a moment, most people can remember it clearly, even if they've never named it, when they stopped blaming someone else and started asking what they could actually do. Maybe it happened after a failed relationship, or a professional setback, or a long stretch of frustration that finally became unbearable. Maybe you're still waiting for that moment to arrive. Whatever the case, that shift, from looking outward to looking inward, is the single most important transformation a person can make. It is the move from being a passenger in your own life to being the driver. Taking full responsibility does not mean pretending that nothing unfair has ever happened to you. Things have. Some of them may have been genuinely serious. Bad luck is real. Circumstances are real. Other people's actions affect us in ways we did not choose and could not prevent. None of that is being dismissed here. But here is the truth that changes everything. Between what happens to you and what your life becomes, there is a space. And in that space is a choice. Your choice. How you respond, what you do next, what meaning you assign to what occurred, all of that is yours. And no one and nothing can take that away from you without your permission. The moment you internalize this, you stop feeling helpless. Because helplessness is the feeling that your life is being shaped by forces you cannot influence. Responsibility is the recognition that regardless of what those forces have done, you still get to decide your next move. That is not a burden, it is the deepest form of freedom available to any human being. Ask yourself honestly, where in your life are you still waiting for someone else to fix something? Where are you explaining your current situation by pointing at the past, at other people, at circumstances? Those explanations may be accurate. They may even be fair. But as long as they are your primary focus, they are keeping you from the only question that actually moves things forward. What can I do with this, right now, from where I am? That question is where your power lies. Now, once you've claimed that power, the next question is, what do you do with it? And the answer is not a single dramatic act. It is something far less glamorous and far more effective. It is the structure of your ordinary days. Think about the last week. Not the highlights, not the moments you would post about or tell someone, the actual texture of your daily life. When do you wake up? What do you do first? How do your mornings feel? Where does your afternoon go? What do you do when you're tired or bored or mildly frustrated? What are you like when no one is watching and nothing is required of you? That is your life. Not the goals you have written down somewhere. Not the person you intend to become eventually. The actual, repeated pattern of your ordinary days, that is the thing that is building your future, right now, whether you are paying attention to it or not. Strong habits are not about willpower. People who misunderstand this exhaust themselves trying to force behavior through motivation and discipline that they have to fight for every time. Habits, when they are properly built, remove the fight. They become the path of least resistance. You do not decide every morning whether to brush your teeth. The behavior is so embedded that it simply happens. The goal is to make the behaviors that build the life you want feel that same way. This happens through repetition, through environmental design, and through connecting behaviors to something larger than the moment. When you understand why a habit matters, not just abstractly but to your specific vision of who you are becoming, it stops feeling like something you do to be disciplined and starts feeling like something you do because it is who you are. Identity-level habits are the most powerful kind because you stop fighting your own resistance and start expressing your own character. What habits are currently building a version of you that you do not want to become? And what habits, practiced daily without exception, would build the person you actually respect? Here is a related question worth sitting with. What are you currently protecting that you should not be protecting? Not your savings, not your relationships, your attention. Your focus. The quality of your mental engagement with your own life. We live in an era designed to capture and monetize human attention. The phone in your pocket contains thousands of engineered mechanisms whose sole purpose is to prevent you from thinking for too long without interruption. Every notification, every algorithmic feed, every autoplay function exists because your sustained attention is worth money to someone, and the easiest way to capture it is to constantly fragment it before it can settle on anything meaningful. The result is that most people have essentially lost the ability to focus. Not as a permanent neurological condition, as a habit. Because focus, like any other capacity, is trained by use. If you spend years practicing fragmented attention, responding to constant interruption, switching rapidly between surfaces without going deep on any of them, that becomes your default mode. And the cost is enormous, not just in productivity, but in the quality of your inner life. Think about this. When did you last sit with a problem long enough to actually solve it? When did you last engage with something completely enough that you lost track of time? When did you last feel the specific satisfaction that comes from finishing something that required sustained effort? If those experiences feel distant, the issue is not your intelligence or your capability. It is the environment you have built around your attention. Reclaiming focus is not about becoming a monk or throwing your phone into a river. It is about being honest about what actually deserves your attention and then protecting your capacity to give it fully. An hour of genuine deep work, no interruptions, full engagement, real thinking, produces more than 4 hours of scattered effort punctuated by notifications. And over time, the person who can focus becomes categorically different from the person who cannot. What would you build if you gave it your full attention consistently? Building that capacity requires a kind of knowledge about yourself that most people avoid developing. It is easier to stay on the surface, moving quickly, staying busy, keeping the focus outward. But the person who does not know themselves deeply is constantly surprised by their own reactions, derailed by patterns they do not recognize, and unable to make consistent progress because they do not understand what is actually driving their choices. Self-awareness is not navel-gazing. It is practical intelligence. When you understand your own triggers, your own defenses, your own recurring thought patterns and emotional responses, you gain the ability to intervene in those patterns rather than simply act them out. You stop being governed by your own history and start being guided by your own intention. The most direct path to this is daily reflection. Not hours of journaling, 10 honest minutes asking the right questions. What happened today that was worth noting? Where did I show up well and why? Where did I fall short, and what is the actual reason, not the convenient excuse, the real reason? What am I avoiding that I know I need to face? The discomfort of these questions is the point. The things you are not willing to look at are precisely the things that are running your life from the background. Honest reflection makes them visible. And once something is visible, you have a choice about it. Ask yourself, what is the pattern you keep repeating that you have not yet been willing to fully examine? Now let's talk about direction. All of this self-awareness, all of these habits, all of this reclaimed focus, where is it going? What is the larger shape of the life you are trying to build? A clear vision is not a wish list. It is not a collection of goals you have written down somewhere. It is a vivid, specific, emotionally resonant picture of the person you are becoming in the life that represents your real values, not what sounds good, not what would impress people, what actually matters to you. Most people do not have this. They have a vague sense of wanting things to be better, wanting to be more successful, wanting to feel more satisfied. But vague wanting produces vague results. Clarity produces traction. The way to develop clarity is not to think harder. It is to be more honest. Strip away the noise of what others expect and what culture suggests you should want. What would a genuinely good life look like for you, specifically? What would you need to be doing, and who would you need to be, for you to feel that your time is being well spent? What matters to you enough to be worth real sacrifice? When you answer those questions honestly, a direction emerges. And then the practical question becomes, does how you spend your time match where you say you are going? Because the gap between intention and behavior is where most lives quietly fail. Not through dramatic failure, through slow drift. Through days that are busy but not directed, through weeks that pass without meaningful progress, through years that accumulate without the sense that you are actually building anything. The vision creates the compass. The daily plan turns the compass into steps. And the steps, taken consistently, create the life. What you build is also shaped by your relationship to difficulty. And this is worth confronting directly because most people have a complicated and ultimately self-defeating relationship with hard things. Difficulty is uncomfortable. The body and mind are wired to avoid it. This is not weakness, it is biology. The problem is that in the modern world, the path of least resistance leads almost directly away from anything that genuinely develops you. Ease is everywhere. Entertainment is endless. Comfort is always available. And if you simply follow the pull toward ease, you can spend years being very comfortable and making no real progress at all. Building a life you respect requires deliberately choosing difficulty on a daily basis. Not punishment, deliberate challenge. The workout when you do not feel like it. The hard conversation you have been avoiding. The project you keep not starting because you are waiting to feel ready. The habit you keep not building because you are waiting for the right conditions. Here is a question worth sitting with: what hard thing have you been putting off, and what is that delay actually costing you? The irony of avoidance is that the anticipation is almost always worse than the thing itself. Fear expands in the space between the stimulus and the action. The moment you move, the fear contracts. Every time you act despite discomfort, you prove to yourself, not in theory but in evidence, that you are capable of doing hard things. That accumulated evidence becomes the foundation of genuine self-confidence. Not the performed confidence of someone who is compensating, but the quiet, deep confidence of someone who knows they will show up when it matters. That confidence also has profound implications for how you relate to other people. We absorb the standards of those we spend the most time with. We calibrate our sense of what is normal, what is possible, and what is acceptable based largely on what we see in the people around us. This is not weakness, it is how human beings learn. The question is whether you are using it intentionally. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. What standards do they hold? How do they handle difficulty? What do they believe about what is possible? Are they pushing you toward your best self or subtly normalizing a version of yourself you have already decided to leave behind? This is not about judging anyone. It is about being clear-eyed about the influence your environment has on you. The most disciplined, focused, ambitious person will drift if they are consistently surrounded by people who are not those things. And conversely, someone who is struggling can be profoundly transformed by genuine community with people who are further along and willing to pull them forward. Who in your life challenges you to be better? And where might you find more of those people? The final thing worth saying in all of this is about time. Not time management in the productivity hack sense, the actual experience of time as a human being. You have a finite number of days. Not as a concept, as a lived reality. The days are passing. The question of who you are becoming is being answered right now, today, by what you are choosing to do and not do. Not by your plans. Not by your intentions. By your actual behavior in your actual life. Progress is not a destination. You do not arrive at growth and then maintain it passively. It is a practice, sustained by the decision to keep engaging honestly with who you are and who you want to be. That decision made once is inspiration. Made daily, it is transformation. The people who look back on their lives with real satisfaction are not the people who had the most talent or the easiest circumstances. They are the people who kept showing up. Who kept making the next honest choice. who built their character through consistent effort over time rather than waiting for a moment of dramatic change that never quite arrived. Your best self is not some future version of you waiting to emerge when the conditions are finally right. It is the version of you that shows up today, in the actual circumstances of your actual life, and chooses growth over comfort, honesty over convenience, action over delay. That choice is available to you right now. So here's my final question. If you woke up tomorrow morning and decided that today was the day you started actually living the way you know you should be living, what would be the first thing you would change? Whatever just came to mind, start there. Not when you finish this. Not tomorrow. Now. Because the only moment you have ever had any power over is this one. And it is enough. Let me add something important here, something the personal development world often glosses over because it is uncomfortable to say directly. Most people already know what they need to do. You probably know the habits you should be building. You probably know the conversations you have been avoiding. You probably know the thing you keep postponing, the pattern you keep repeating, the excuse you keep reaching for. The problem is rarely a lack of information. It is the gap between knowing and doing, and that gap is almost always emotional, not intellectual. Fear of failure. Fear of what it would mean to really try and still fall short. Fear of disrupting a familiar identity, even an identity you do not particularly like. Fear of discovering that the life you have been putting off building is actually available, which would mean there is no one left to blame for the years you did not spend building it. These fears are real. Acknowledging them is not weakness. It is the beginning of being able to work with them rather than being unconsciously driven by them. Because the things you are most afraid to face are almost always the exact things your growth requires you to face. Think about the area of your life where you feel most stuck. Now ask yourself honestly, what would I have to admit, do, or let go of to actually make progress there? Usually the answer is not complicated. It is just uncomfortable. And the discomfort has been enough to keep you circling the problem without ever walking directly through it. What happens when you stop circling? The answer is almost always better than the avoidance. Not pain-free, not without awkwardness or difficulty, but better. You handle the conversation and the relationship shifts. You start the project and the paralysis breaks. You make the choice and the regret you were so afraid of never materializes. Instead, there is the specific relief of having finally done the thing you knew needed to be done. Action is the cure for most of what feels stuck. There is also something worth saying about the internal conversation you carry with yourself through every day. We talk about habits and behaviors and vision, but underneath all of those external patterns is a constant internal narrative, the story you are telling yourself about who you are, what you are capable of, why things are the way they are, and what is and is not possible for you. Most of this narrative runs automatically, below conscious awareness, assembled from years of experience and feedback and the things people have said to you, some of which were true, some of which were not, and much of which you absorbed before you had the tools to evaluate it critically. That internal narrative matters enormously. Not because positive thinking magically changes outcomes, but because the story you believe about yourself shapes what you try, what you persist through, and what you write off as beyond your reach without genuinely testing the limit. A person who believes at a deep level that they are someone who follows through will behave very differently than a person who believes they are someone who always eventually gives up, even if their surface-level intentions and goals are identical. This is why self-awareness and honest reflection are not soft concepts. They are fundamentally practical. The person who examines their internal narrative has the ability to revise it based on evidence and intention. The person who never examines it simply enacts it, as if it were reality rather than a story, and wonders why they keep ending up in the same place. What story about yourself do you need to stop telling? And what evidence from your own life, evidence you may have been discounting, supports a different, more accurate story? There is one more dimension here that deserves direct attention: the role of other people in your growth. Not in the motivational sense of finding cheerleaders. In the more precise sense of understanding how deeply the quality of your relationship shapes the quality of who you become. Human beings are fundamentally social. This is not a philosophical position, it is biology. We regulate our nervous systems through connection. We form our sense of what is normal and possible through comparison with those around us. We are influenced, shaped, challenged, and held back by our relationships in ways that are often invisible to us precisely because the influence is so constant and so close. The question of who you spend time with is therefore not a lifestyle question. It is a developmental question. Show me consistently the people who shape your daily thinking and I will tell you the direction your life is moving. Not because those people are determining your destiny, you are, but because the environment they create is the water you are swimming in. And it is very hard to swim upstream indefinitely. Who challenges you? And I mean actually challenges you, not in the sense of being difficult, but in the sense of holding a standard that raises yours, of asking questions that push you to think more clearly, of living in a way that makes you want to be more of who you say you want to be. If you cannot name those people easily, that is useful information. And the mirror image is equally important. What relationships in your life normalize behavior or thinking that your better self already knows is not serving you? This is not about judgment. It is about being honest that when people around you consistently minimize ambition, excuse avoidance, celebrate comfort at the expense of growth, or view the world through a lens of blame and victimhood, those perspectives seep into you, not through weakness, but through the basic human mechanism of social calibration. Protecting your standards sometimes means having honest conversations. Sometimes it means creating distance. Sometimes it means actively seeking out communities where the baseline is closer to where you want to be. None of this is cruelty. It is the specific form of self-respect that takes your development seriously enough to protect the environment it happens in. Now, about the long game. One of the most reliable patterns in personal growth is this: people dramatically overestimate what one burst of effort can produce in a month, and dramatically underestimate what consistent daily effort produces in 5 years. This asymmetry destroys more potential than almost anything else. Because when the month passes and the dramatic transformation has not materialized, people conclude the effort was not worth it and stop, right before the compound curve would have begun to show. Genuine growth does not look dramatic while it is happening. It looks like showing up when you do not feel like it. It looks like making the slightly better choice when the worse one is entirely available. It looks like keeping your word to yourself when no one would know if you broke it. None of these moments look significant from the inside. But over the course of a year, 5 years, 10 years, they produce a human being who is categorically different from someone who spent those same years taking the easier path every time. This is why patience is not a passive quality. Patience in the context of growth is the active discipline of staying in motion during the periods when progress is invisible. It is understanding that the work you do today that produces no visible result is not wasted, it is deposited. And one day, without warning, the accumulated investment becomes visible all at once, and people who have not been watching closely say you got lucky. You did not get lucky. You showed up for 1,000 ordinary days when ordinary felt like enough of a reason to stop. Let me bring this home with a question I want you to actually answer, out loud or in your head, before you move on. Think about the version of yourself 5 years from now who has made no significant changes, who has continued the patterns, avoided the hard things, stayed comfortable, and told themselves they would start seriously working on it later. What does that life look like? How does that person feel on a Tuesday morning? What do they regret? Now think about the version of yourself 5 years from now who started today. Not perfectly, not with some comprehensive life overhaul, but who made one real decision and followed through, and then made another, and then built a rhythm. Who showed up for their own life with intention and honesty and the willingness to do the work. What does that life look like? How does that person feel? The gap between those two versions of you is not talent. It is not circumstance. It is not luck, connection, or starting position. It is whether, in this period of your life, you made the daily choice to grow. That choice is in front of you right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. And here is the beautiful, terrifying, completely true thing about it: you already know what it looks like to make that choice. You have made it before, in smaller ways, in specific moments when you showed up and followed through and felt the specific satisfaction of having done so. You know what that feels like. You know how different it feels from the other version. The question is simply whether you will choose it consistently enough and long enough to let it compound into something undeniable. You already have everything you need to begin. Not to finish, not to arrive, not to have it all figured out. To begin. And in growth, beginning is everything. Because once you are moving, genuinely moving with intention, your capacity expands, your clarity deepens, and the path reveals itself in ways it never does from the place of standing still. So make the choice. Today. In this moment. Not with fanfare or announcement, just with the quiet internal commitment of someone who has decided, really decided, not as a feeling but as a direction, that they are not going to waste the time they have been given. The version of you that you are capable of becoming is worth fighting for. The life that consistent growth produces is worth the daily work it requires. And the person reading this right now already knows that, which is why you are here. The only question that remains is what you will do with this moment. Start there. That is enough. That has always been enough. Begin.